Anne of France, also known as Anne de Beaujeu, was born in April 1461 at the Château de Genappe in the Burgundian Netherlands, which was located in the territory of Philip the Good. Anne was the daughter of King Louis XI and Charlotte of Savoy. Anne was betrothed to the young Nicolas de Lorraine, Marquis de Pont-à-Mousson, who was a grandson of René d'Anjou and the heir to the thrones of Lorraine, Bar, Anjou, Maine, Provence, Naples, and Sicily. On July 27, 1473, however, her fiancé died and Anne went on to marry Pierre de Beaujeu, the later Duke of Bourbon, who was more than 20 years her senior. The marriage contract was signed at Jargeau near Orléans on November 3, 1473, and the marriage took place the following year. At the time of the wedding, Anne was 12 years old. Her husband, Pierre, was 35. Their union would produce only one child, Suzanne de Bourbon-Beaujeu, who would go on to become the Duchess of Bourbon after her father's death. From 1473 onwards, the health of Anne's father, King Louis XI, started to deteriorate. Feeling his end approaching in 1483, the king declared on his deathbed that he wanted Anne and her husband, Pierre, to assume the regency during the minority of her brother, the Dauphin and future King of France, Charles VIII. Upon Louis's death on August 30, 1483, the 13-year-old Charles ascended the throne. But Charles's health was poor, and although he was regarded by his contemporaries as possessing a pleasant disposition, he was also considered to be foolish and unsuited for politics. Anne, who was described as being clever and talented, took over the regency for her 13-year-old brother. A heated argument broke out between Anne and her brother-in-law, Louis of Orléans, about the guardianship and the exercise of power on behalf of the underage king. After the decision of the General Assembly of 1484 that a Regency Council needed to be erected, Charles's Regency Council was headed by Anne and her husband Pierre, and state affairs were to be handled by Cardinal Guillaume Briçonnet. As regent, she preserved the country's point of view against feudal disintegration, especially against the Orléans party that rebelled during the so-called Mad War, which lasted from 1485 until 1488. During the War of the Roses, which shook England at the end of the 15th century, Anne supported Henry Tudor against his rival, King Richard III. When Henry asked her for help to overthrow his enemy, Anne sent him French troops, enabling Henry to invade England in 1485. Henry would go on to win the Battle of Bosworth Field and ascended the throne of England under the name of Henry VII, thus becoming the first Tudor king. In addition to her duties as regent, Anne supervised the education of many children of French royalty of the time, including the education of Diane de Poitiers, royal mistress to Henri II of France, and Louise de Savoy, who was the mother of François I of France. She also took care of the education of Margaret of Austria, who would later become governess of the Habsburg Netherlands. In 1491, Anne annexed Brittany into France by forcing Anne of Brittany to marry her brother Charles VIII after she successfully led France's war against Brittany to victory. For more information on the political circumstances leading to this union, please watch my video on the three wives of Louis XII. Furthermore, Anne secured the succession to the Duchy of Bourbon for herself and her husband after the death of the Duc de Bourbon, Jean II. Jean was succeeded by his younger brother Charles, but his succession was strongly contested due to the political strength of Pierre and Anne. Within a span of days, Charles was forced to renounce his claim to the Bourbon lands and handed over the duchy to Pierre in exchange for a financial settlement. With time, however, Anne's position in France became less strong as Charles VIII of France became more secure in his position as king. Anne, Pierre and their daughter left the French court and settled in their Duchy of Bourbon at the Château de Chantelle. This did not conclude Anne's involvement in French politics, however. Anne became regent of France once more from September 1494 until July 1495, when Charles VIII traveled to Italy to occupy the Kingdom of Naples. The relationship between Charles and his wife, Anne of Brittany, was in such a bad shape that he did not trust her to take up the regency, but instead asked his sister to do so. Anne's husband Pierre, Duke of Bourbon, died in 1503 and was succeeded by the couple's only daughter Suzanne, who now became the Duchess of Bourbon. However, Anne remained very dominant during the reign of her daughter and remained the administrator of the Bourbon estates even after her husband's death. Anne de Beaujeu died in 1522, aged 61, in the Château of Chantelle. She was buried with her husband in the Abbey of Souvigny. Thank you for watching.